first. So two of the images on your requirements are hidden line images from Revit. Okay, Revit does have a rendering engine. It's highly tolerable, but it's not as powerful as Twinmotion. So we're going to focus on Revit, what Revit does really well, which is line drawing. Okay, so if you think about Cliff House, the one thing that's really missing from this right now to be ready for a hidden line is some kind of ground plane. So I'm definitely going to take a second and just add in a ground plane. And then also we are missing, that is one of the entry doors. And I know that that comes out to a deck. We're missing that as well. So I wanted to model those two things in really quickly to prep this drawing, both to push to Twinmotion and to create the hidden line drawings. Yes, question. There is a door here, according to the plans, and then there's totally a door here, and I totally haven't modeled it because, yeah, and there's more windows over here too. Yeah, no, I'm totally slop artisting this together, right? I'm just not going to show those sides in my renderings. You should have them. Oh, and speaking of which, again, you don't have to show me everything in these renderings. So if there's something you don't have modeled, I'm good with that, right? But one of the things that I am looking for on everyone's that I have not shown you how to model, that I want you to model, is the cross bracing underneath here, right? I want you to do a little bit more work on the structure, and I'm not going to show you how to do that. I've given you the tools that you need to do it. I want you to learn how to do that because eventually you have to start modeling some of these more complicated things on your own. I'll be happy to answer, like if you are completely stumped, I'll be happy to work with you one-on-one. But it's going to be showing you a reference, not walking you through step by step. Okay, so I am looking for that on everybody's because I don't think that there's a way to render any of these without showing that X bracing in there. And it's definitely going to look weird without the X bracing in it. Okay, so let's do this little deck and hand railing first. It's so super easy to do. So I'm just going to go into my level 1. And I am going to select the ground, or not the ground, but the floor. I think I've modeled the floor in this. Yeah, there it is. So easiest way to grab that, probably in the 3D view. So I'm selecting, that's my floor system right here. And I'm just going to go to Edit Boundary. And Edit Boundary takes me to those purple lines. Okay, so then I can go to level 1. And I know from looking at the imagery, the deck isn't nearly this big. But I kind of don't care. It looks so cool with it. It's going to make for some great renderings. So I'm going to go ahead and model it that big. So I'm just going to draw my line from here to here, and here, and I know that is going to trim here, and that means I can get rid of that line, and I can also trim this line to that line. Okay, so I'm just going to highlight that so you can see that's sort of the new shape of the entry-level floor. Okay, and it's just going to act as a guide for me right now. The reality is if I have this as a decking material and this as an interior floor material, I might very well probably will, yes, need to change those up. But for right now, it's going to act as a really good guide. So I'm going to green checky box that. And you can see I now have that shape. The next thing that I need to add is my guardrail that runs across. Okay, so another really easy thing to add in. So I'm going to do back to level 1 again. And under architecture, we have railing. Railing's really easy to work with. The only thing that's tricky to remember about railing is where typically things need to be a closed loop. Railing needs to be a closed, not a closed, but a continuous line. Okay, so the default railing, I'm going to just use the default railing first. I'm going to trace right over the top of that edge, here to here. And again, I'm going to look at that in 3D so we can all see where those two lines are, here and here. I'm going to green checky box that, and I get this sort of picket railing. Vertical pickets as railing. Okay? First point to note. This is the hand railing that shows up quite often in student projects. And here's the thing, y'all. It is not a particularly attractive hand railing. Bad. Call it what it is. It's bad. So we shouldn't see it, in short. Really easy to switch, and a better default, if I just select that, is I can come down and do a guardrail pipe. And again, all of you should remember by now, the difference between guardrail and handrail is the difference between a guardrail and a handrail. Yes, guardrails should be on stairs, but guardrails should be on stairs because you can fall off of them over a certain height. What is the height of a guardrail? Minimum height of a guardrail. More. Less. 42 inches. So 42 inches is your guardrail height, and that keeps you from falling over and dying. Right? So that is a guard rail. A handrail is something that you're grasping. So that's going to be more in the 32 to 36 inch height. So a stair actually needs both a guardrail and a handrail. And they are two different things that have to show up and be built in two different ways. Okay, so be aware of that. So this, around the outside, needs a guardrail, and I would suggest switching it to the guardrail pipe. It's a little more transparent, and there's even better ones to do than this that you can grab. But that is a better looking default, usually. Okay, so if you'll notice, as a guardrail pipe, it has both a handrail, which is this element right here, and a guardrail height on it, which is 42 inches. Okay, so I've got both of those two pieces in place. And then I need, for the sake of getting this put together as a hidden line image inside of Revit, I really want to put some kind of ground plane in. And I could take the time to build a quick topography, but frankly, I don't have that much time, nor the desire to build that. So I'm just going to build a great big generic model so that I can have a base ground plane in place. Okay, so to do that, really, really easy to do, and always recommend get a ground plane in. We need something to catch shadows. We need something to reference eye height, those kind of things. Okay, so to do it, I'm going to go Component, Model in Place, Generic Models, and I want to, a cliff house, right? It's on a wedge-shaped thing. It's on a sloping ground. So I'm going to select this wall as my reference plane and just basically draw in a slope. So generic models, okay. I'm going to do an extrusion. I'm going to set my reference plane to this wall. And at that point, I'm going to just sort of draw in a piece that I know is going to do something slopey. And I could have done that just as I could have made a big triangle, but you know, why not be a little bit fancy? It could get really distracting if all of these lines show up really aggressively in my hidden line. I might really regret having made that. We'll see. Okay, so from there, I'm going to green checkbox, and I'm just going to stretch this out both directions to build that slope. And then say finish. Okay, so the thing to remember when you start putting together hidden line drawings is this, the first thing to remember, this default 3D view, this is an axonometric. It is not an immersive drawing. Okay, there are times that we need axonometrics. They do a good job showing us volume, but I know that this is an axonometric because it has a scale. Right now I'm working at 1/8 inch scale. Okay, I need a perspective. I want something more immersive. That's what we're working on this week. So first, really nice immersive drawing might be something from here looking this direction. Okay, and that's also the easiest one to set up, so that's a good starting point. So I'm going to go to my level 1. And I'm going to go to View. And underneath my 3D view, if I click, anytime I have that little arrow, remember I've got more options. And I'm going to go to Camera. The other location you can find this is right here, this default 3D view button. The little down arrow right beside it also is Camera. Okay, so anytime I am setting up a three-dimensional immersive image, I'm always thinking like a photographer. Okay, I've got to take my architecture hat off, put my photographer hat on. I know that you always want to show all of your building because you've worked really hard on it. But that doesn't necessarily always make for a good photographic image. So you want to change what you're thinking. You want to really begin thinking about, how do I create a really good image? So I'm going to do something. I'm left clicking once to click the point of my camera. I'm going to left click a second time for how far the camera is actually viewing. The default setup is pretty boring. It's sort of like a 4:3 aspect ratio, right? And a much better way to sort of show the world is more like a 16:9. Okay, there's a reason. Who watched the Oscars last night? That was exciting, wasn't it? I won't go any further into that. I actually didn't see that live, but I started seeing people post on it about 11 o'clock last night. I was like, hey, that's good times there. 16:9. There's a reason why a lot of film happens in the 16:9 aspect ratio, and that's because it's more how we see the world, right? We see more width than we do height. Okay? So that's a really good way to think. Revit's default pops up as like a 4:3. It's more like an old school TV that I grew up with that none of you grew up with. No idea why that's default. It's kind of weird. So first thing I always do is stretch it wider. Okay? And it's really easy to do. You can just grab these grips and start pulling it out. And I'm certainly not going to measure, is this correct, 16:9? But we should definitely start to sort of see how that's working out. Okay? Next, line weights. I got nothing. Right? I have no good line weights in this at all. So we need to turn some of those things on. To do so, we are right down here. Graphic display options. Activate that. Always, you have to turn this on. Otherwise, your drawings will just not pop at all. Okay? So graphic display options. So in this, we've got a list. And again, this is really well organized for you. It's going to read top down. Okay, our style is hidden line. We really want to keep it that way. Revit does that best, right? Revit is great for our hidden line drawings. Next, always smooth lines with anti-aliasing. I have no idea why that's not on by default. It's assuming that our computers are absolute junk. I haven't seen smooth lines with anti-aliasing like crash anybody's computer yet. So anti-aliasing, if you look at this guardrail right here, you can see how that's really jaggy, right? It's going up in steps and up in steps. When I turn anti-aliasing on and hit apply, instantly much better. Essentially, anti-aliasing is going to add more gray. It's going to give you more detail for the lines. It's asking more of your graphic processing unit, your GPU, but not that much more. Okay, so really that should just be on by default. Anytime I see work that's on the wall and I see funky lines, it's either a problem with resolution or somebody forgot to click that button. Always turn it on. Next, silhouettes. When we talk with you in Rep 1, we're always saying depth of field and edges should be thicker lines. Okay, Revit has both kind of worked in. It has some depth of field. It's called depth hewing. Frankly, I can never get it to work, so I don't really pay attention to it. But edges should always be switched. Your silhouette edges should always be switched to wide lines. And when I hit apply, you can immediately see it has added this much larger, much wider line to these key edges. And usually, Revit just does a pretty nifty job of determining which line should be a heavier line weight. And you don't have to worry about it too much. Okay, so silhouettes always set to wide lines, right? So those are the first three. They're super, super easy to do. Next is shadows. Shadows are sometimes great, sometimes terrible, to be blunt about it, okay? If I turn shadows on, getting something like that is not particularly helpful, right? If I turn ambient shadows on and do that, that is particularly helpful. Oh, dead laptop. Okay. Simply because if I'm going to cast shadows, I shouldn't say always, 9 times out of 10 though. At least 9 times out of 10. I want shadows going away from the camera. Okay, if my shadows are coming towards the camera, I'm losing depth. I can't see how a wall is formed, how a wall is shaped. I don't see the detail on it because the entire wall is in shadow, right? So ambient shadows, however, give you a little bit of gradient across a surface. You notice this surface is darker here, lighter here. Really helps you read depth. Depends on the situation. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. Okay, let's continue to go down. Sketchy lines. This used to play out great in architecture school because you've done all the 3D modeling, you wanted to read like a hand drawing, but you didn't have time to do a hand drawing. Okay, so there was the sketchy lines, and it really this came from SketchUp, is the one that really kind of popularized this as a mode of distributing work. What I will say though is it still works really well. It's just all of the faculties across the world have understand this is a trick that you haven't really drawn, so be aware of that. In particular though, this is a tool when you're working professionally with clients. Really appreciate this based on where you're at in progress. Showing this as a drawing starts to look finished, right? And what that means to a client is I no longer have input. I can't ask questions. It's a subconscious thing. Trust me, you'll see it happen. But if I just turn sketchy lines on, so I'm going to hit enable sketchy, and usually 2-4 work really well for me, and do this, all of a sudden all the drawing edges are fuzzy. It looks like it's hand drawn, and a client's much more willing to talk with me about it. Okay, having sketchy lines on is not a requirement for any of these drawings because, again, I know it's just a trick. It's a sleight of hand. But be aware that it's there and know when and how to use it. Okay, if I'm doing a large board presentation and I want to do 6 to 8 hidden line drawings that kind of show a sequence, I want to stylize those so that they all match. And like switching everything to sketchy lines with the ambient shadows can work really, really well. Okay? Depth queuing, as mentioned, never really works for me. There's some voodoo in there. I can't get it to work. Feel free to explore and figure it out. If I wanted shadows on and falling away from the camera, I would come in and adjust my lighting here. For right now, I'm just going to leave that off. We might take a look at it on the next view. Realistic, we're not going to touch it because we're staying in the hidden line. This gets into cameras and camera values, those kind of things if we're trying to do a realistic rendering, which again, I'm just going to be blunt, Revit doesn't excel at that. It's a lot of work for not a lot of reward. Background, I would suggest setting that to none on most of these projects for your hidden line. Just to switch it over, if I do sky, I get that. Sometimes it's just way too aggressive. Gradient works much better. But even then, I'm not really too wild about that horizon line. It's a little bit distracting because that's not really where the horizon line would be on a house that's on a cliff. So typically, I am just saying, you want to leave that to none. Cool. So this is almost ready to export as a JPEG file so that it's immediately ready to either print, incorporate into Photoshop, or upload to your website. But there's one key thing to go through, and that is we have no idea what the resolution of this image is. So anytime that I set up something coming from my camera view, I need to select this crop region. And I need to click on Size Crop. And this is going to give me my image width and height. Okay, super important to check this. I have a lot of these will come in at like 3x2 for some reason. I think the default size is 4x5. Again, something along those lines, or 5x4, something like that. I would say a really good starting point for these to get reasonably high resolution is going to be something more in the realm of 17 by 11, right? So 17 inches wide, 11 inches high. Now, I've got two radio buttons here, field of view and scale. If I leave field of view checked and I modify, let's just say modify the width and hit apply, all that it's going to do is stretch the box out, which I don't really want. What I want is I want everything to size up in terms of its resolution. So to do that, I need to make sure I select the scale radio button. So then when I come in and say I want my width to be not 71, but 17 inches, as soon as I click in the height box, you're going to see it changes that as well. Okay, and when I hit apply, the only thing that you're really going to notice is a subtle shift in the line weights. Because this is now a larger image, you should see the line weights decrease by just a pinch. So this is now a 17 by 11 image. Much better image, much higher resolution for me. Okay, so from here, I can go File, Export, and I'm going to scroll down to Export Images and Animations, and we are going to export an image. Okay, everybody with me? So, again, it's so bizarre that things are set default to fit to. We don't want fit to. We want zoom to 100. Okay, we're exporting a JPEG. We do not want a medium quality. We want JPEGs set to lossless. Again, weird defaults. You guys, really weird defaults. JPEG set to lossless. 72 would be our standard resolution for that would be our standard resolution for web. But I want you to practice not putting this towards the web, the internet. Typically, we're setting these up for print. in which case 72 would be way too low. So we're going to set this not to 72, but at least 150. Because we're not printing them out, I'm not going to tell you to set it to 300, and that's your dots per inch. We'll cover dots per inch here once we really get into image editing next week. But for right now, let's set that to 150. And then it's simply saying where it's going to go, or referencing where it's going to go, so you know where you're saving your images at. I do not want to save this to users, dbeach01, documents, Cliff House. For right now, I'm just going to send it to my desktop. So this is Cliff House Deck View 1. Okie dokie. And again, should go really, really fast because there's really not a lot of calculation work for Revit to do. So if I minimize and minimize and minimize and still minimize, I should have a JPEG right here on my desktop. Just like that, easy peasy. Now, not easy peasy is trying to do something more dramatic. Base of the cliff looking up. So that's what I want to set up as my next image. Okay, and that's going to get a little bit more complicated, but still totally doable. Okay, so let's go back into Revit. I am going to rename this from 3D View 1. Rename. This is Deck View. I will say it about 1,000 times through the end of the semester. Please name your views. None of you will. But when we sit down to work on you with Revit or something else, usually by the midpoint in the semester, if you're working in Revit, you'll have like, I don't know, 14 or 15 different 3D views, all of them named 3D View 1, 3D View 2, 3D View 3. It's so annoying, you guys, because then we say, oh, let me show you what that view is. Oh, it's not that one. 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 And it's like total eye roll moment. Organize your stuff, you guys. It took about a second for me to rename that deck view. Okay, it will save you a ton of time later on if it'll be organized. So let's go to level 1. So I want a view down here looking across. So I'm going to go back to camera, 2 clicks to get that. Okay, kind of cool, kind of, but not really. I'm going to set up my graphic display options very quickly again. Smooth lines, wide lines, ambient shadows. I wonder what casting shadows looks like in this view. Meh. I'll keep them on. Casting because I like that right there. That's kind of nifty. Casting shadows, and just for good fun and measure, I'll do sketchy lines one more time, 2 and 4. And that's it. Okie dokie. So, kind of nice, but if you'll notice, the camera comes in as a default at ground level. Specifically, it comes in at 5 feet 4 inches above ground level. So I was on level 1. It placed the camera at 5 feet 4 above ground level. So I'm still flat looking across, which is a really good default, and a default that we often want to use. But if I want to move this so that the camera is down and then looking up, I need to be able to do that in an elevation view. So let's go rename. Let's call this Cliff View. I'm going to move to which elevation? I'm not sure. I'm thinking east, hoping east. And what I need to do is I need to come to Cliff View, and then I'm going to go right click and show camera. It's definitely a little hidden secret handshake kind of thing. There are other ways to do it. Like I could come in and select my camera and manipulate its height, but all of those cameras are sort of hidden by default. and this is the easiest way that I've found to show and teach the method of sort of being able to change your view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, and I'm just going to left click and drag and pull that down closer to the ground plane. This is my focal point, what I'm looking at. I'm actually going to drag that up a little bit as well. And then I'm going to go back to glyph view and instant drama. Cool? Go with me? Now, if you'll also note, I'm really looking at how to set this view up. I'm thinking about rules of thirds. I'm thinking about what's missing, what's there, what's not there. I know that I've got more work to do on this, but what I'll also say, and this is one of the things that kind of drives me crazy with y'all, be building these images early in your process. Don't bury yourself into Revit and try to finish and then do the representation. Okay, representation is a design skill, and it's a critiquing, critical thinking skill. Build these rep images early and often in your process. When you're doing reviews, desk reviews, peer-to-peer reviews, any of that kind of stuff, it's so much better to not do those reviews in Revit. Build these kind of views. Show what you're thinking, what your design ideas are by building views and doing discussions about your projects from views like this, not from the axonometric view and the plan views while you're navigating around Revit. Okay? So, same trick with this. I would come in, File, Export, Image, and Image. Oh, I didn't change my size of my box. Select that, size crop, scale, width 11 inches. Much better. File, export, image. Zoom to 100, JPEG, lossless and lossless, 150 DPI, Cliff House, ground. Oh, this was Cliff View. So now I have Cliff View. Come on. Cliff View out of the computer. Cool? Go with me? Pretty easy to do. This is what I'm looking for your hidden line images. Maybe sketchy on, maybe sketchy off. We will get into Entourage on the next project, because these are, again, Revit doesn't really have a good Entourage catalog for us. Photoshop does, because once we go to Photoshop or Affinity, we have the entire internet worth of Entourage. Okay? So it's better, in my opinion, to think about doing Entourage for these kind of images in your image editing software, not in Revit. Cool? Okay, so our last task for today is taking this file and pushing it into Twinmotion. Okay, so to do that, first thing, we need to be in our 3D view, axonometric 3D view. If I can see it inside of Revit, it is going to export. So if there's something you don't want to export, I can hide it. For right now, I am going to go ahead and export this as a ground plane. If you're getting ready to bring this into your Twinmotion site, you don't necessarily need to do that, but I don't really have a site in Twinmotion yet, so I'm just going to use that as my base. But I am going to go from right here, from the three-dimensional axonometric view. And I guess part of what I'm saying with that, if I were to export, and I haven't tried this in a long time, I'm not going to try it today, but if I export from a level 1 view, an FBX file, it probably isn't going to send all the data. Okay, I need to be in my 3D axonometric view, which can also be really handy too, because I can crop things with my three-dimensional view, and it's only going to export what's showing. I can hide things in this view, all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go File, Export, FBX. And this is just going to be labeled Cliff House. I don't really need all the extra stuff on there. Cliff House. And save. Then I'm going to go over to Twin. Again, first thing up on Twin is the import button. So I'm going to go import. Make sure you are importing geometry. We are not using direct link yet. We do not want to import landscape, although really cool and interesting things happen. We learned the hard way with that. And we're not importing a point cloud. We are importing geometry. So make sure that is what's highlighted. I'm going to go open and select Cliff House FBX. Typically, the defaults are good. Okay, so you might check and make sure that the defaults are on for what you have here. And I'm going to say import. And there we go. There's the Cliff House. Now, the first thing that you'll note is I'm not sure if yours is going to import the way mine did, but it imported really close to 0. So I do want to select, I'm just going to left click the ground plane way over here. And I'm going to expand my selection right over here so that I can tell I do have the starting ground selected. And I'm going to delete it because I don't need it. And we aren't going to go much further than this today, other than first material I pretty much always apply is materials, glass, and I'm just going to start with the simple clear glass to get, but I just applied it to my mullions. Simple clear glass so that I can know that I've got things starting to come together correctly. And that's as far as we're going to get today, because I know the things that I need to start working on are going to be dividing up materials, adding a little bit of additional detail in Revit, and working from there. Okay? But I also know I am in a much better starting point to create imagery that's going to be evocative of my materiality and immersion from Twin than I am from Revit. Cool? That's it for today, you guys. Stick around if you've got questions. You've got a few minutes to work through any of those to make sure that you're feeling comfortable with your Revit file in terms of exporting hidden line drawings and exporting your FBX files into Twinmotion. Okay, because we're starting right here on Wednesday. Yeah.